When people hear the word saber-tooth, they usually imagine a single animal, a massive Ice Age cat with huge fangs standing beside mammoths in frozen landscapes. In reality, that famous animal represents only the final chapter of a much older and stranger story. Sabertooths were not one species, not one genus, and not even one family. They were a recurring evolutionary design. Nature kept inventing them again and again across tens of millions of years. To understand sabertooths, we first need to abandon the idea that they were simply cats with long teeth. The long teeth were only the visible outcome of a deeper anatomical transformation. A sabertooth is better described as a specialized predatory body plan built around a particular killing strategy. Instead of relying on bite force like modern big cats, these animals evolved to deliver precise, soft-tissue killing bites using elongated upper canines combined with extreme jaw opening and powerful forelimbs. This distinction matters because some sabertooths were not cats at all. They only resembled cats in body shape due to convergent evolution. Convergent evolution occurs when unrelated animals develop similar structures because they face similar ecological problems. Wings evolved in birds, bats, and insects independently. In the same way, saber teeth evolved multiple times in mammalian predators that were separated by millions of years and different evolutionary lineages. The earliest saber-tooths appeared roughly 40 million years ago during the Eocene epoch. At this time, the world was warmer and dominated by forests rather than grasslands. The mammals living in these environments were very different from modern ones. Hoofed animals were smaller and often slow-moving browsers. There were no modern deer, antelope, or bison yet. Instead, ecosystems contained archaic herbivores with thick hides and bulky bodies. Predators needed a way to kill prey larger than themselves without engaging in prolonged struggles that could cause injury. This environment produced the first saber-toothed predators. These animals discovered an alternative to crushing bites. Rather than suffocating prey like lions do today, they used sharp canines to slice through vulnerable areas such as the throat. The key innovation was not simply lengthening the teeth. The entire skull had to change to allow the teeth to function without breaking. Modern cats can open their jaws about 60 degrees. Sabertooths could open theirs up to 100 or even 120 degrees, depending on species. This extreme gape allowed the long upper canines to clear the lower jaw and penetrate deeply into prey. However, opening the mouth that wide weakens bite force. The jaw muscles become mechanically disadvantaged. Sabertooths compensated for this weakness by shifting the killing effort away from the jaw and toward the neck and forelimbs. Their neck muscles were massive and their forelegs were extraordinarily strong. Instead of biting down hard, they anchored the prey with their limbs and drove the canines downward using head and neck motion. The bite itself was not a crushing clamp, but a controlled stabbing action. The canines were not built to endure sideways pressure. They were designed to enter flesh along a specific path. If twisted or forced against bone, they could snap. Because of this fragility, saber-tooths were likely precision hunters rather than wrestlers. Modern predators often struggle with prey for minutes. A saber-tooth needed to immobilize quickly and strike accurately. This suggests ambush hunting behavior. The predator would close distance, latch onto the prey with forelimbs, destabilize it, and deliver a rapid throat bite before resistance intensified. The skull structure reflects this strategy. Saber-tooth skulls were short and tall rather than long and narrow like cheetahs. The cheekbones flared outward to anchor powerful neck muscles. The lower jaw often had a downward flange, a bony extension that protected the canines when the mouth closed. The upper canines themselves were flattened like blades rather than round like daggers. Serrations sometimes lined their edges, increasing cutting efficiency. Another important feature was reduced biting musculature compared to modern big cats. A lion kills primarily by suffocation, using jaw pressure around the throat or muzzle. This requires extremely strong jaw-closing muscles. Saber-tooths sacrificed this force. Their killing ability came from geometry and motion, not pressure. In mechanical terms, they were closer to surgical instruments than crushing tools. Because the entire anatomy revolved around this specialized bite, saber-tooths were vulnerable to ecological change. If prey type shifted towards smaller or faster animals, their design became inefficient. Long teeth are advantageous for penetrating thick hides and large necks, but disadvantageous for chasing agile prey that requires repeated bites. This specialization explains why saber-tooths appeared repeatedly but rarely lasted indefinitely. Whenever ecosystems contained large, slow herbivores, evolution favored the saber strategy. When environments changed, those lineages disappeared. Later, predators would reinvent the same design under similar conditions. One of the biggest misconceptions is that Smilodon, the famous Ice Age saber-tooth, represents the peak of saber evolution. In reality, Smilodon was only one late experiment among many. Earlier forms looked very different. Some resembled civets, others resembled bears. Some were lightweight runners, while others were heavy ambush specialists. The only consistent feature was the elongated upper canine and the supporting skull modifications. Another misunderstanding concerns their intelligence and behavior. Popular depictions show saber-tooths as oversized lions with longer teeth, but their hunting method likely demanded a different behavioral repertoire. Precision killing requires controlled movement rather than brute force attacks. Many paleontologists suspect they relied heavily on positioning and timing rather than pursuit speed. In summary, the term saber-tooth does not describe a taxonomic group, but a functional category. Multiple unrelated predators converged on the same killing solution because it worked under specific ecological circumstances. The next chapters will introduce the earliest of these animals, the so-called false saber-tooths. They looked feline at first glance, yet genetically they were not cats at all. They represent the first time evolution tested the saber design, setting the stage for all later forms that followed. The animals often called the false saber-tooths were the first to demonstrate that the saber design could function in a mammalian predator. These creatures belonged to a group known as the Nimravids. At first glance, they appeared almost identical to early cats. They had flexible bodies, long tails, retractable claws in some species, and a stalking posture similar to modern felines. For many decades, paleontologists believed they were primitive members of the cat family. Only later anatomical studies revealed that they branched off before true cats evolved. The distinction is subtle but important. True cats belong to the family Felidae, which includes lions, tigers, leopards, and house cats. Nimravids split from the carnivore lineage earlier. Their resemblance to cats evolved independently because they occupied the same ecological role. They were cat-shaped predators in a world where the true cats had not yet appeared. The earliest Nimravids lived in forest-dominated environments. Dense vegetation favored ambush predators over pursuit hunters. Visibility was limited, and prey animals relied less on speed and more on camouflage and bulk. In such habitats, a predator capable of delivering a rapid, lethal wound had a significant advantage. A long, piercing bite could end a struggle before the prey had time to fight back or flee into cover. One of the best-known Nimravids is Homotherium. This animal lived roughly 33 million years ago and demonstrates the early stage of saber evolution. Its upper canines were long, but not extremely elongated compared to later saber cats. The skull already showed widening cheekbones and a reinforced neck region. Unlike later Sabertooths, however, its body was relatively slender. This suggests a transitional killing method combining gripping and stabbing, rather than relying entirely on the specialized strike seen in later forms. Another Nimravid, Xenosmilus, pushed the design further. Its canines became dramatically elongated and flattened into true blades. The lower jaw developed a protective flange that shielded the tips when the mouth closed. This indicates the teeth had become fragile enough to require constant protection. The presence of this bony guard reveals how committed the lineage had become to the saber strategy. Once teeth reach a certain length, ordinary biting risks catastrophic breakage. The skeletal proportions of Xenosmilus also changed. The forelimbs grew heavier relative to the hind limbs. This shift reflects a transition away from chasing toward grappling. A predator that relies on accurate throat strikes must first immobilize prey. Strong arms allow it to pull prey off balance and hold it steady during the killing bite. In contrast, pursuit predators favor long hind limbs for speed. Dinictis represents another variation among Nimravids. Its teeth were shorter and its body proportions closer to a generalized carnivore. Some researchers think it hunted smaller prey and used a less specialized bite. This diversity within Nimravids shows that the saber condition did not appear suddenly as a complete package. Instead, it evolved through incremental changes, with different species experimenting along the spectrum between generalized predator and extreme specialist. Examining their skull mechanics helps clarify how these animals killed. The jaw joint in Nimravids was positioned lower relative to the skull than in modern cats. This increased the possible gape angle. However, The muscles that closed the jaw were not proportionally stronger. The animals could not clamp down with crushing force. Instead, the geometry allowed a downward slicing motion powered by neck flexion. Essentially, the head acted as a pivoting blade. Fossilized wear patterns on the teeth support this interpretation. The tips often show minimal crushing damage, but evidence of slicing contact. If they regularly bit bone, the teeth would display fractures and heavy wear. Instead, the edges remained sharp, indicating they contacted soft tissue most of the time. This suggests a killing bite directed at the throat or major blood vessels rather than random biting during struggle. The prey animals of the time reinforce this model. Many herbivores possessed thick neck muscles but lacked the agility of later ungulates. A precise cut severing major arteries would cause rapid blood loss. In a forest environment where long chases were impractical, this method reduced the chance of injury to the predator. Nimravids thrived for millions of years, but eventually disappeared. Their extinction was not sudden. Gradual climate cooling transformed large areas of forest into open woodland and eventually grassland. As visibility increased, prey species evolved speed and endurance. The ambush-focused saber strategy became less reliable in these new environments. A predator that depended on close approach struggled when prey could detect it from a distance and outrun it. Around the same time, the true cats began to diversify. These new predators used different strategies. They relied more on flexible biting, stronger jaws, and adaptable hunting behaviors. While they did not initially possess extreme saber teeth, they could exploit a wider range of prey types. This versatility gave them resilience during ecological transitions. The disappearance of nimravids did not mark the end of sabertooths. Instead, it proved the viability of the design. Later lineages would evolve even more advanced versions adapted to changing environments. The saber concept had been tested and refined. Evolution would now apply it again, but within new predator groups better suited to the expanding grasslands. Thus, the nimravids represent the first chapter in the recurring history of saber predators. They were not evolutionary dead ends, but early prototypes. Their anatomical experiments established the blueprint. Elongated canines, wide gape, powerful forelimbs, and precision killing bites. Future sabertooths would modify and exaggerate these features, producing some of the most specialized predators ever to exist. By the time the nimravids disappeared, the world itself was changing. Forests were shrinking, climates were cooling, and vast stretches of open woodland were appearing across continents. Prey animals were becoming taller, faster, and more aware of distant threats. For a moment it seemed the saber strategy might fade away with the early false sabertooths. Instead, evolution produced a new lineage that would carry the concept further than before. These predators were the barbarophilids. Unlike nimravids, barbarophilids appeared later during the Miocene epoch, roughly 20 to 5 million years ago. They are sometimes described as a bridge between false sabertooths and true saber cats, but that description oversimplifies them. They were not simply intermediate in time. They represented a fundamentally different interpretation of the saber-killing method. Where nimrovids were relatively slender and cat-like, barborophilids were heavy, muscular animals built for overpowering prey. Their bodies resembled a cross between a lion and a bear. The shoulder girdle was enormous, the forearms thick and reinforced, and the paws wide. These were not fast pursuit predators. They were grapplers designed to dominate physically before delivering the killing bite. One of the earliest known members of this group is Xenosmilus. Compared to later species, its canines were modest in length, but already flattened into blade shapes. The skull was deep and tall, allowing the attachment of large neck muscles. Unlike nimrovids, whose killing action depended heavily on precision placement, Xenosmilus could apply significant force during the strike. Its anatomy suggests the animal pulled prey downward while simultaneously driving its canines into soft tissue. This difference is important. The saber strategy now incorporated strength as well as accuracy. Rather than avoiding struggle, barborophilids could control it. Their forelimbs were capable of holding prey animals firmly in place, reducing the risk of lateral movement that could break the teeth. Once immobilized, the head and neck delivered the final stab. As millions of years passed, the lineage produced larger and more extreme forms. Xenosmilus represents a more advanced stage. Its canines lengthened further, and the lower jaw developed a pronounced flange. This flange acted as a sheath protecting the teeth when the mouth closed, but it also stabilized the jaw during impact. When the predator struck, the lower jaw pressed against the prey while the upper canines entered at a controlled angle. The entire skull functioned as a guided cutting instrument. The shoulders of Xenosmilus were particularly robust. Fossil limb bones show thick cortical bone and expanded joint surfaces, indicating the ability to withstand heavy loads. These animals likely subdued prey by pulling it to the ground rather than tripping it during a chase. This suggests hunting in areas where short bursts of movement were enough to close distance, such as wooded edges or mixed terrain rather than open plains. The most famous barborophilid is Barborophilis itself. Some species of this genus reached sizes comparable to or larger than modern lions. Their upper canines could exceed 20 centimeters in length. At this scale, the teeth could not be used casually. Every strike required careful positioning. The animal's anatomy reflects this constraint. The neck vertebrae were thick and reinforced, allowing powerful downward flexion. The shoulder blades were wide, anchoring muscles that stabilized the body during impact. Even the hind limbs were relatively short, prioritizing stability over speed. This predator did not sprint after prey. It waited, lunged, and overpowered. The prey available during the Miocene suited this approach. Many herbivores were large browsing mammals, such as early giraffe relatives, rhinoceroses, and primitive horses that had not yet evolved modern running efficiency. A heavy ambush predator could approach from cover and rely on strength rather than endurance. Once contact was made, escape chances were minimal. To understand how Barborophilis killed, researchers examined the relationship between canine curvature and jaw opening. The teeth were not straight daggers, but curved backward. When the mouth opened fully, the tips aligned with a downward arc of motion. As the head moved forward and down, the teeth sliced rather than punctured vertically. This slicing action caused massive blood loss quickly, ending resistance before prolonged struggle occurred. Interestingly, the teeth show little evidence of bone contact. Breakage would have been catastrophic, and natural selection favored individuals that struck only soft regions. The throat, underside of the jaw, or abdominal area of prey were likely targets. Once the arteries were severed, the prey weakened rapidly. Barborophilids spread across Africa, Eurasia, and North America. Their success lasted millions of years, demonstrating the saber concept could function even in more open environments when combined with sufficient physical strength. Yet, their dominance was temporary. Another evolutionary development was underway. During the late Miocene, true cats began diversifying into multiple hunting styles. Some became pursuit hunters, others ambush specialists, and a particular subgroup started evolving saber teeth of their own. These were the Machairodontine cats, the true saber cats. Unlike Barborophilids, they belonged to the cat family. Their sensory systems, limb flexibility, and predatory behaviors were closer to modern felines, but their skulls would become even more specialized than any saber predator before them. The saber design was about to be reinvented once again, this time within a lineage that would refine it to its most iconic form. Barborophilids ruled their ecosystems for millions of years, yet they faced a challenge no predator could ignore. The world continued drying and cooling. Grasslands expanded across continents, and prey animals adapted quickly. Horses lengthened their legs and developed hooves suited for sustained running. Antelope, like herbivores, evolved, alert herd behavior and wide field vision. The slow ambush grappling approach began losing reliability. A predator built mainly for overpowering close targets now struggled to initiate contact. This environmental shift created selective pressure toward more flexible hunters. Predators needed both ambush ability and mobility. Strength alone no longer guaranteed success. The Barborophilids had committed heavily to their design. Their heavy forequarters and reduced endurance limited their capacity to adapt. Over time, their populations declined and eventually vanished. However, the Sabertooth strategy did not vanish with them. Instead, it reappeared inside a lineage that possessed greater agility and behavioral versatility. These animals belonged to the cat family itself. They are known as the Machairodontines, the true saber cats. The earliest members of this group did not immediately resemble the extreme forms like Smilodon. Early species such as Machairodus retained relatively balanced proportions. Their canines were enlarged but not excessively elongated. The skull still allowed a wide gape, yet the body was lighter and more mobile than that of Barborophilids. This combination suggests a hybrid hunting style. Machairodus likely stalked prey and launched short pursuit bursts before grappling. Unlike the heavy specialists before them, they could adjust tactics depending on prey behavior. Their hind limbs were longer, supporting moderate running ability, while the forelimbs remained strong enough for control during the kill. This flexibility may explain their success during a time of rapidly changing ecosystems. Anatomical studies of Machairodus skulls reveal an important shift in mechanics. The jaw joint moved slightly higher relative to earlier sabertooths, improving leverage during closure. While still weaker than modern lions in raw bite force, they regained some clamping capability. This allowed them to grip temporarily while positioning the killing bite rather than relying entirely on a single precise strike. Another species, Machairodus, shows further refinement. Its teeth were more curved and laterally compressed. The serrated edges became clearer, functioning like cutting blades rather than piercing spikes. Serrations help slice tissue efficiently, similar to the edge of a steak knife. This feature reduced the force required to penetrate thick hide. Combined with neck-powered motion, it enabled fast, lethal wounds. The development of serrations also implies prey diversity. In grassland environments, herbivores varied in size and defense. Some possessed thick skin, others relied on speed. A cutting weapon works across a wider range of targets compared to a purely stabbing tool. Therefore, Machairodontines gained ecological versatility lacking in earlier saber lineages. Hemimachairodus represents another transitional form. Its limbs suggest better endurance than older sabertooths, though not equal to cheetahs or wolves. It probably hunted medium-sized ungulates, selecting individuals that strayed from groups. The kill would still involve a throat slash, but reaching that position required maneuvering and brief chasing rather than immediate overpowering. One of the most significant differences between Machairodontines and previous sabertooths lies in their sensory adaptations. The eye sockets indicate forward-facing binocular vision similar to modern cats. This depth perception improves distance judgment during the final strike. Accurate placement was essential because the teeth remained vulnerable to breakage if misaligned. The brain case also enlarged slightly, suggesting improved coordination and motor control. Their paws retained retractable claws more consistently than earlier forms. Retractable claws remain sharp because they avoid constant ground contact. Sharp claws improve grip during prey capture, stabilizing the animal before the killing bite. This again shows the blend of agility and precision unique to true sabercats. The spread of Machairodontines across Eurasia, Africa, and the Americas marked a new era of saber evolution. Instead of one dominant heavy lineage, multiple species occupied different niches. Some grew larger and more robust, others lighter and more mobile. Over time, two distinct designs emerged within the group, based primarily on canine shape. The first design involved extremely long, slender canines, later called dirk-toothed sabertooths. These animals specialized in large prey and relied heavily on immobilization before delivering a deep stab. The second design involved shorter, broader, serrated canines known as scimitar-toothed sabertooths. These predators were faster and capable of repeated slashing bites during active struggle. This division represents a major evolutionary experiment. Nature tested whether extreme specialization or moderate versatility would prove more successful. Both designs coexisted for millions of years, suggesting each filled a different ecological role. The next chapter will examine how these two killing strategies developed and how they led to the most famous saber-tooths ever discovered. As Machairodontine cats spread across continents, their evolution did not follow a single path. Instead, natural selection split them into two very different predatory strategies. Both kept the saber concept, yet they emphasized different mechanical solutions to the same problem: how to quickly kill large prey without risking injury. These strategies produced two famous types of saber-cats. Later researchers would call them the dirk-toothed saber-tooths and the scimitar-toothed saber-tooths. The dirk-toothed design pushed specialization to the extreme. The upper canines lengthened dramatically, becoming narrow blades sometimes longer than the animal's skull height. These teeth were ideal for deep penetration but extremely fragile if twisted sideways. To use them safely, the predator had to immobilize prey almost completely before delivering the strike. Every aspect of the body evolved to support this requirement. One of the earliest representatives of this line was Megantereon. This animal lived roughly 3 to 2 million years ago and existed across Africa and Eurasia before eventually reaching North America. Compared to later forms, it was moderate in size, about similar to a modern jaguar. However, its forelimbs were disproportionately strong. The humerus and radius bones show expanded muscle attachment areas, indicating powerful pulling ability. Megantereon likely hunted medium to large ungulates in partially open habitats. Its strategy probably began with stalking from cover, followed by a rapid pounce aimed at the shoulders or neck. Instead of wrestling extensively, it attempted to topple the prey sideways. Once balance was lost, the saber cat could position its jaws safely. The skull of Megantereon shows a wide gape, but not the maximum seen in later species. This suggests an evolutionary midpoint. The teeth were long enough to require caution, but short enough to tolerate slight movement during the bite. The lower jaw flange protected the tips when the mouth closed and may also have acted as a stabilizing brace during impact. The true perfection of the dirk-toothed design appeared in the genus Smilodon, but its mechanics began here. The animal depended on strength, leverage, and precision timing. Bite force measurements reconstructed from jaw musculature indicate it was weaker than a modern lion of equal size. Instead of crushing, it cut. The killing motion is best understood as a controlled downward stabbing arc. After gripping prey with forelimbs, the saber cat retracted its head slightly, then drove it downward using neck flexion. The canines entered soft tissue between vertebrae or into major blood vessels. Rapid blood loss would cause collapse within minutes. Because the teeth were fragile, behavior had to minimize chaos. This means dirk-toothed saber cats probably preferred isolated individuals rather than attacking large coordinated herds directly. They may have targeted young adults, separated from groups or animals trapped in uneven terrain. Parallel to this lineage, another branch took a different direction. The scimitar-toothed sabertooths shortened their canines and broadened them, adding serrations. The teeth resembled curved knives rather than needles. This modification reduced breakage risk and allowed more active biting during struggle. The best-known member of this group is Homotherium. Unlike Megantereon, Homotherium had relatively longer legs and a lighter frame. Its spine sloped downward from shoulders to hips, giving it a hyena-like silhouette. This body plan suggests better endurance and possibly group hunting behavior. Homotherium's canines were only about half as long as Smilodon's, but far more robust. Instead of relying on a single precise strike, it could slash repeatedly. The serrations enhanced cutting efficiency, meaning each bite opened deeper wounds even with moderate pressure. The skull also differed significantly. The gape angle remained wide but not extreme. The jaw-closing muscles regained strength compared to dirk-toothed forms. This allowed the predator to maintain a grip while repositioning. The overall effect was a more versatile weapon capable of handling struggling prey. Trackway evidence and fossil distribution suggest Homotherium inhabited open plains more frequently than dirk-toothed relatives. In such terrain, prey detection occurred earlier, making perfect ambush difficult. A predator able to pursue briefly and continue attacking during movement had an advantage. These two approaches represent evolutionary trade-offs. The dirk-toothed sabercats specialized in precision lethality, sacrificing flexibility. The scimitar-toothed sabercats sacrificed maximum penetration but gained reliability and adaptability. Both strategies succeeded for long periods because ecosystems offered diverse prey types and habitats. Understanding this divergence is essential to understanding later sabertooths. The iconic Smilodon would refine the dirk strategy to its most extreme form, while Homotherium would spread across multiple continents as a more generalist predator. Evolution was testing two solutions to the same ecological challenge, and for a time both worked remarkably well. The difference between dirk-toothed and scimitar-toothed sabercats was not only visible in the length of their canines, it extended into nearly every aspect of their anatomy and behavior. Each design required a different approach to hunting, and the fossil evidence allows paleontologists to reconstruct these lifestyles with surprising detail. Dirk-toothed sabercats such as Megantereon evolved toward mechanical precision. Their forelimbs became thick and heavily muscled, far stronger relative to body size than those of modern lions. The shoulder joints allowed powerful inward rotation, meaning the animal could pull prey toward its chest and pin it to the ground. This movement stabilized the target before the bite, reducing unpredictable motion that could snap the fragile canines. The claws also played a crucial role. Retractable and sharply curved, they functioned like grappling hooks. When the sabercat leapt, it aimed to secure the shoulders or upper torso of the prey. Once attached, it shifted weight forward, forcing the prey off balance. A fall or stumble was the critical moment. Only then would the killing bite occur. Because the teeth were so long, the lower jaw could not close tightly around bone. The animal had to aim for soft entry points. Likely targets included the throat, the underside of the jaw, or the abdominal region behind the rib cage. Any misalignment could result in tooth fracture. This necessity explains why dirk-toothed species rarely show healed canine breaks in fossils. Broken teeth usually meant death, so individuals that misjudged strikes did not survive long enough to fossilize frequently. This fragile weaponry shaped social behavior. A predator dependent on such precise attacks could not afford chaotic group struggles like modern lions sometimes engage in. While some researchers propose small cooperative groups, the evidence more strongly supports solitary or loosely associated hunting. Each individual needed space to execute a controlled kill. The scimitar-toothed sabercats followed a contrasting path. Homotherium, the prime example, possessed shorter but sturdier teeth and a more flexible neck motion. Its forelimbs were still strong, but less exaggerated than those of dirk-toothed relatives. The hind limbs were longer, indicating better running capacity. These cats could pursue prey for moderate distances before engaging. Wear patterns on Homotherium teeth show more frequent contact and higher usage rates than those of dirk-toothed species. This suggests repeated biting during an attack rather than a single decisive stab. The serrations along the canines acted like cutting edges, producing long slicing wounds that caused rapid blood loss over time. The prey weakened progressively rather than collapsing instantly. Evidence from fossil sites containing multiple individuals hints at social tolerance, possibly even coordinated hunting. In open grasslands, working in small groups would allow the animals to isolate prey from herds and exhaust it before closing in. While not identical to wolf packs, this behavior would have reduced the precision requirement placed on a single bite. Body proportions reinforce this interpretation. Homotherium's sloping back placed the shoulders higher than the hips, optimizing forward propulsion. This configuration is seen in endurance-oriented predators today. Combined with moderately strong jaws, the animal could bite, release, and bite again as the prey slowed. These differences illustrate two solutions to the same ecological challenge. The dirk-tooth strategy aimed to end the encounter quickly with minimal struggle. The scimitar-tooth strategy accepted prolonged engagement but reduced risk of weapon failure. One depended on control, the other on persistence. Environmental conditions influenced which strategy dominated a region. Forest edges and broken terrain favored dirk-toothed ambushes. Wide plains with alert herds favored scimitar-toothed pursuit attackers. Both types often coexisted by targeting different prey sizes or behaviors, avoiding direct competition. Over time, the dirk-tooth lineage continued exaggerating its features, leading to animals with extraordinary canine length and massive forelimbs. Meanwhile, the scimitar-toothed cats expanded across continents, even reaching cold northern environments. The stage was now set for the most famous saber-tooth of all, a predator that pushed the dirk design further than any species before or after. Among all saber-tooths, one genus would become the ultimate expression of the dirk-toothed design. This animal did not simply have long teeth, Its entire body was reorganized around the requirements of delivering a perfectly controlled killing strike. That animal was Smilodon. Smilodon first appeared roughly 2.5 million years ago and survived until about 10,000 years ago. It lived during the Pleistocene epoch, a time defined by repeated ice ages and dramatic environmental swings. Unlike earlier saber-tooths that occupied mostly one continent, Smilodon spread across North and South America, adapting to a wide range of habitats from woodlands to open plains. There were three main species. Smilodon gracilis was the earliest and smallest. Smilodon fatalis became the common North American form, and Smilodon populator grew into the largest saber-tooth ever known, reaching weights possibly exceeding 400 kilograms. Despite their size differences, all shared the same fundamental body plan. The proportions of Smilodon were unlike any modern cat. The forelimbs were extraordinarily massive, with muscle attachment sites larger than those of a lion or tiger. The shoulders formed a broad, powerful chest capable of generating immense pulling force. In contrast, the hind limbs were shorter and less suited for sustained running. This was not a pursuit predator. It was a grappler, designed to overpower prey at close range. The skull reveals the full commitment to specialization. The upper canines could exceed 28 centimeters in length in large individuals. They were flattened side to side and finely serrated. The jaw could open over 110 degrees, far wider than any living cat. Yet the bite force at the tips was relatively weak compared to modern big cats. Smilodon did not crush, it cut. The lower jaw had a prominent flange that protected the canines when the mouth closed. Without this structure, the tips would contact the ground or break during feeding. The neck vertebrae were reinforced to handle powerful downward motion. When the animal struck, it used its neck muscles more than its jaw muscles, driving the teeth into soft tissue like blades guided by a hinge. Understanding how Smilodon hunted requires examining its prey. During the Ice Age, the Americas hosted large herbivores, including bison, camels, giant ground sloths, and young mammoths. Many of these animals were massive, but not especially fast. However, they were dangerous if allowed to struggle freely. A broken limb or crushed rib would mean death for the predator. Smilodon likely relied on concealment and short ambush bursts. It approached within a few meters before launching forward. The forelimbs wrapped around the prey's torso or shoulders, pulling it off balance. The cat then forced the prey sideways or downward. Only after immobilization did the killing bite occur. The bite itself was precise. Researchers believe Smilodon targeted the throat, severing major blood vessels. The long canines allowed penetration through thick fur and skin, reaching arteries that shorter teeth could not access easily. The result was rapid blood loss, leading to collapse. Unlike lions, which suffocate prey over several minutes, Smilodon probably killed in a shorter time once the bite landed correctly. Evidence from fossil injuries provides further clues. Many Smilodon skeletons show healed fractures and joint damage. This indicates individuals survived serious injuries, suggesting social tolerance or cooperative behavior. An injured predator would struggle to hunt alone. So some scientists propose small groups sharing food. Others argue scavenging could explain survival. The exact behavior remains debated, but the frequency of healed wounds implies interactions beyond solitary existence. The extreme specialization of Smilodon also imposed limitations. Its short legs reduced endurance. Its fragile canines restricted target choice. It could not easily hunt small, fast animals because repeated bites risked tooth damage. It depended heavily on the presence of large herbivores. As long as these animals thrived, Smilodon thrived. This dependence would eventually become a weakness. Environmental instability and the arrival of new competitors would challenge even the most perfectly adapted predator. But during its peak, Smilodon represented the most refined saber-killing machine evolution ever produced, a predator built not for chase, but for decisive close-range execution. The hunting sequence of Smilodon becomes clearer when the mechanics of its body are examined step by step. Everything began with distance control. Because it lacked endurance speed, Smilodon could not afford a failed chase. It needed to approach undetected until the final moment. Woodland edges, brush cover, and uneven terrain were ideal. These environments disrupted the line of sight of large herbivores and allowed the predator to remain hidden until it entered striking range. Once within range, the attack was explosive but brief. The cat launched forward using powerful hind limb extension, not to pursue but to close the last few meters instantly. The goal was contact, not pursuit. The forelimbs then became the primary weapons. They wrapped around the prey's upper body, and the claws anchored deeply into muscle. This grip transferred the animal's weight onto the prey, destabilizing it. Unlike lions that often leap onto the back and hold during a prolonged struggle, Smilodon likely attempted to topple the prey sideways. The shoulder structure allowed inward pulling force greater than that of modern cats. By pulling down and to the side, it could cause even large animals to stumble. A loss of balance was critical because the killing bite required stillness and alignment. After the prey lost stability, Smilodon repositioned its head. The jaws opened to an extreme angle, clearing the lower jaw from the entry path of the canines. The neck muscles then drove the head downward in an arc. This motion has been compared to a guillotine rather than a clamp. The teeth sliced into the throat region, severing arteries and possibly the trachea. Massive bleeding followed almost immediately. This method explains why bite force measurements at the canine tips appear weak. Force was not generated by jaw closure, but by neck-powered impact. The jaws merely guided the blades. Once the teeth penetrated, the animal likely withdrew rather than maintaining a grip. Continued holding could expose the teeth to sideways movement as the prey collapsed. Fossil evidence supports rapid disengagement. Many prey bones from sites associated with Smilodon lack crushing marks typical of prolonged biting. Instead, they show minimal tooth scoring, suggesting feeding occurred after the prey had already died. The predator killed first, then returned to consume flesh using the carnassial teeth at the back of the mouth, which were better suited for slicing meat. The famous La Brea tar pits in North America provide additional insight. Hundreds of Smilodon individuals have been recovered from these deposits. Many appear to have been attracted to trapped herbivores struggling in tar. The high number of predators compared to prey indicates repeated visits by multiple individuals. This pattern suggests tolerance among individuals at feeding sites. Whether they hunted cooperatively or merely gathered around opportunities remains uncertain, but they did not behave as strictly territorial, solitary cats. Growth patterns in bones also hint at extended juvenile dependence. Young Smilodon individuals required time to develop coordination for accurate killing bites. Juveniles with incomplete saber growth would struggle to hunt alone. Prolonged parental care or group association could increase survival during this vulnerable stage. Despite these advantages, Smilodon had strict ecological requirements. It relied on large herbivores whose bodies justified the risk of using delicate teeth. Small prey would not provide enough reward compared to the danger of breakage. If large prey numbers declined, the cat faced starvation rather than dietary adjustment. Competition also shaped its life. The Ice Age Americas contained other formidable predators, including large wolves and massive bears. These animals could run farther and scavenge more efficiently. Smilodon's specialization meant it could dominate close-range kills, but might lose carcasses after feeding if confronted by groups of endurance hunters. The final thousands of years of the Pleistocene brought rapid climatic fluctuations. Vegetation patterns shifted, affecting herbivore populations. At roughly the same time, humans expanded into the Americas. Human hunters targeted many of the same large herbivores. The combination of environmental stress and new competition reduced the availability of the prey Smilodon depended upon. Without consistent access to large animals, the saber strategy became a liability. A predator optimized for a single method cannot quickly change behavior or anatomy. Within a relatively short geological time span, Smilodon disappeared, along with many other large Ice Age mammals. Its extinction marked the end of the dirk-toothed lineage's most specialized representative, but not the end of saber-tooths entirely, as other forms still persisted in different regions for a time before the saber design vanished completely. While Smilodon perfected the extreme dirk-tooth strategy in the Americas, another saber-tooth lineage was thriving across a far broader geographic range. This predator did not rely on a single precise killing stab. Instead, it combined cutting teeth, moderate speed, and endurance into a more flexible hunting system. This animal was Homotherium, the most successful scimitar-toothed saber cat. Homotherium appeared earlier than Smilodon and survived in Africa, Eurasia, and North America. Its range extended from temperate plains to colder northern regions, even reaching environments close to glacial margins. Such distribution already reveals a key difference. A highly specialized ambush predator like Smilodon depended on specific terrain and prey. Homotherium could adapt to multiple habitats. The body shape immediately distinguishes it from the massive American sabertooth. Homotherium stood taller at the shoulders and sloped downward toward the hips. The hind legs were relatively long, giving it a more level running stride than the heavy grappling cats. The chest remained strong, but not excessively bulky. Overall, it resembled a hybrid between a lion and a hyena, built for covering distance rather than overpowering instantly. The canines were shorter and broader than those of Smilodon, and their edges bore serrations. Instead of penetrating extremely deep into a single spot, these teeth produced long slicing wounds. They were far less likely to snap during struggle. This durability allowed the animal to bite repeatedly while prey attempted escape. Skull mechanics show a compromise between bite strength and gape. Homotherium could still open its jaws wider than modern cats, but not to the extreme angle required by dirk-toothed saber cats. The jaw-closing muscles were stronger relative to body size. This allowed it to maintain contact with prey rather than striking once and withdrawing. Its hunting sequence likely began with detection at a distance. In open environments, prey animals often spotted predators early, making stealth difficult. Instead of abandoning the attempt, Homotherium could continue with a measured chase. It probably was not as fast as a cheetah, but capable of sustained pursuit faster than large herbivores over moderate distances. Once near, the predator attacked from the side or rear, biting and releasing repeatedly. Each bite opened deep cuts that bled heavily. The prey weakened gradually, losing stamina and coordination. Eventually, it slowed enough for the saber cat to secure a final throat bite. This method resembles modern pack predators more than solitary ambushers. Evidence from fossil localities supports social tolerance. Some sites contain multiple individuals of different ages found together. This pattern suggests group living at least part of the time. Cooperative hunting would be particularly effective in open plains, where isolating a herd member requires coordination. Dietary evidence also differs from Smilodon. Isotopic analysis indicates Homotherium often hunted medium-sized herbivores and occasionally young, large mammals. Because its teeth were sturdier, it could exploit a wider prey spectrum without high risk of damage. This flexibility increased resilience during environmental change. Cold climate adaptations further highlight versatility. Fossils from northern latitudes show thicker limb bones and nasal structures suggesting efficient breathing in cold air. The animal likely followed migrating herds across large distances. Unlike forest-dependent ambushers, it functioned well in treeless steppe environments. The coexistence of Homotherium and Smilodon in parts of North America demonstrates ecological partitioning. Smilodon focused on close-range ambush of large prey in covered terrain. Homotherium operated in more open ground and targeted prey through persistence and repeated cutting attacks. Their different tooth structures and body designs minimized direct competition. This adaptability allowed Homotherium to survive environmental shifts longer than many specialized sabertooths. However, even flexible predators rely on stable prey populations. As the Ice Age approached its end, ecosystems changed rapidly. Large herbivore communities reorganized, and human hunters entered many of the same habitats. The scimitar-toothed strategy would soon face pressures it could not overcome indefinitely. To understand why Homotherium survived across so many environments, it helps to examine the mechanics of its body in motion. Unlike the heavy grappling sabercats, its limb proportions indicate a stride designed for efficiency. The shoulder joint allowed a wide forward swing, and the longer lower legs increased step length. This combination reduces the energy cost of running, allowing the animal to maintain speed for extended periods rather than relying on a single explosive leap. The spine also contributed to this locomotion. While still flexible, it lacked the extreme vertical compression seen in ambush specialists. Instead, it functioned as a stabilizing beam during forward movement. The animal could trot steadily, conserving energy until prey fatigue began to appear. This endurance would be particularly effective against herd animals that rely on brief bursts of speed but tire quickly under continuous pressure. The teeth complemented this pursuit strategy. Each bite delivered a long incision rather than a puncture. Because the canines were thick and reinforced, the predator could engage repeatedly without catastrophic breakage. Blood loss accumulated over time. Even if the prey escaped initial contact, the wound reduced stamina, making subsequent attacks easier. In effect, the predator converted speed advantage into physiological exhaustion. Forelimbs still played an important role, though not as overwhelmingly powerful as those of Smilodon. They stabilized prey during close contact, preventing sudden kicks or turns that could injure the attacker. The claws anchored the predator during each bite and allowed rapid repositioning. Instead of holding continuously, the animal likely alternated between grip and release while staying alongside the prey. The potential for social behavior emerges from this method. A single individual could wound prey, but multiple individuals could maintain pressure. Some may have chased, while others attacked when the animal slowed. Cooperative alternation would minimize fatigue and reduce risk to each participant. Although direct evidence of pack structure is limited, bone accumulations and track patterns suggest at least temporary group coordination. This hunting style also influenced feeding behavior. Because the teeth were more durable, Homotherium could remain at the carcass longer and feed alongside others without immediately withdrawing. The risk of damaging critical weapons during feeding was lower than in dirk-toothed species. As a result, individuals may have tolerated each other at kills more frequently. The broad geographic range of Homotherium exposed it to varied prey. In Africa, it may have hunted antelope and young large mammals. In Eurasia, it followed migrating steppe herbivores. In colder northern regions, it likely targeted juvenile mammoths or bison separated from herds. Such flexibility indicates behavioral adaptability in addition to anatomical resilience. Despite these advantages, the species still depended on large herbivore ecosystems. During the late Pleistocene, climatic fluctuations altered vegetation patterns. Grasslands shifted, migration routes changed, and some prey species declined sharply. At the same time, human hunters appeared in many of these habitats. Humans competed both directly by killing prey and indirectly by disturbing herd structures. For a predator, relying on endurance and repeated engagement, reduced prey density posed a serious problem. Longer searches meant higher energy expenditure. Cooperative hunting also required stable group membership, which becomes difficult when food scarcity forces dispersal. Even adaptable predators can fail when ecological networks collapse. Gradually, Homotherium populations diminished across continents. In some areas, they vanished earlier than the most specialized sabertooths, possibly because their wide range exposed them sooner to human expansion. Eventually, the scimitar-toothed lineage disappeared entirely. By this point, both major saber strategies had ended. The dirk-toothed giants like Smilodon vanished in the Americas, and the scimitar-toothed endurance hunters faded from the Old World and northern regions. Yet the broader story of sabertooths cannot be understood only through individual species. Their extinction connects to a much larger ecological transformation affecting nearly all large predators at the close of the Ice Age. By the end of the Ice Age, the disappearance of sabertooths was not an isolated event. Nearly every continent experienced a wave of extinctions among large animals. Mammoths, giant ground sloths, massive bison, and many other herbivores vanished within a relatively short geological interval. The fate of sabertooths was tied directly to this broader collapse. To understand why they could not survive, it is necessary to examine the predator community they lived within. Sabertooths did not rule their world alone. They shared territory with other formidable carnivores, each using a different hunting strategy. In North America, Smilodon fatalis lived alongside dire wolves and the giant short-faced bear. In Eurasia and parts of the north, Homotherium occupied landscapes also used by cave lions and early human hunters. These predators competed for the same prey, but did so using different methods. The dire wolf relied on endurance and cooperation. Its teeth were built for crushing and holding, and its long legs allowed pursuit over distance. A pack could harass prey continuously, exhausting it until collapse. This method required less precision than the saber-tooth strike. Even if individual bites failed to kill immediately, repeated attacks accumulated damage. Such flexibility made wolves resilient to prey variation. The short-faced bear represented another extreme. It may have hunted occasionally, but often acted as a dominant scavenger. Its enormous size allowed it to displace other predators from kills. A saber-tooth that had just brought down a large herbivore might lose the carcass to this giant competitor. Because saber-tooths depended heavily on big prey, losing a kill could mean days of wasted energy. Humans introduced a completely new factor. Early human hunters were not the fastest or strongest predators individually, but they possessed planning ability and coordinated weapon use. Stone-tipped spears allowed them to wound large animals safely from a distance. Fire and group tactics enabled control of terrain. Over time, humans became efficient large game hunters. This combination created multiple pressures. Prey numbers declined due to climate change altering vegetation. At the same time, humans removed individuals from herds directly. The remaining herbivores became more cautious and mobile. For predators specialized in ambush of predictable targets, hunting success decreased sharply. Sabertooths faced an additional problem beyond competition. Their anatomy limited dietary flexibility. A wolf can shift from large prey to smaller animals if necessary. A bear can scavenge, forage, or hunt varied targets. A sabertooth built around killing large herbivores cannot easily switch to chasing small, agile animals. The long canines become a disadvantage when repeated biting is required. Energy balance becomes critical in such conditions. Each failed hunt costs calories, and recovery requires successful kills. As prey scarcity increased, the probability of starvation rose. Juveniles were particularly vulnerable because they required time to develop hunting precision. A population with low juvenile survival declines rapidly. Fossil records show that saber-tooth disappearance often coincided with the disappearance of key prey species in the same regions. In South America, the extinction of large ground sloths and native horses parallels the decline of Smilodon populator. In northern regions, the reduction of steppe herbivores occurred near the time Homotherium vanished. Climate change alone cannot fully explain the pattern because some adaptable predators survived the same environmental shifts. However, specialization magnified the impact. Saber-tooths had evolved for millions of years in ecosystems dominated by abundant megafauna. When that foundation collapsed, their advantages turned into liabilities. The timing also aligns with human expansion into new territories. As humans spread across the Americas and deeper into Eurasia, large animal populations decreased in density. Even small reductions could destabilize predators dependent on high success rates. Sabertooths needed consistent access to large prey, not occasional opportunities. Thus, their extinction likely resulted from combined pressures rather than a single cause. Environmental shifts, altered habitats, prey declined, competition intensified, and human hunting added additional strain. The highly specialized saber-killing method could not adapt quickly enough. Over thousands of years, population numbers dropped until the last individuals disappeared. The disappearance of saber-tooths marked the end of a long evolutionary experiment that had begun tens of millions of years earlier. Yet the reason this design appeared repeatedly throughout history lies in the ecological logic behind it. Whenever ecosystems produced large, slow herbivores in abundance, natural selection favored predators capable of killing them efficiently. The next section explores how that pattern shaped the final chapter of saber-tooth history. The extinction of saber-tooths becomes clearer when we look not only at predators, but at the structure of entire ecosystems. For most of their history, saber-tooths existed in environments dominated by megafauna. These were large herbivores, often weighing hundreds or thousands of kilograms. Their size protected them from smaller predators, but also created vulnerability. Large bodies require large blood supply, and a deep cutting bite to the throat could bring rapid collapse. The saber design evolved specifically to exploit this weakness. During stable climatic periods, megafauna populations remained relatively predictable. Seasonal movements repeated each year, and predators adapted their hunting territories accordingly. A saber-tooth could rely on the presence of certain prey along migration routes or near water sources. Hunting success depended on knowledge of these patterns as much as on anatomy. Late in the Pleistocene epoch, this stability began to break down. Rapid warming cycles altered plant communities. Grasslands expanded in some regions and shrank in others. Wetlands dried or shifted location. Herbivores changed their migration timing, and some species fragmented into smaller, isolated groups. This disruption forced predators to search over larger areas for the same food supply. For adaptable predators, expanding range was possible. Wolves and early dogs could travel long distances and feed on varied prey, including carrion. Bears could consume plants, insects, and carcasses in addition to hunting. Sabertooths lacked such versatility. Their entire feeding apparatus favored fresh kills of large animals. Scavenging posed risks because feeding around bone or in crowded conditions increased tooth breakage chances. Human hunters intensified this instability. They targeted the same predictable migration bottlenecks predators relied upon. A valley crossing used by herbivores for thousands of years could suddenly become a repeated hunting site for humans using coordinated attacks. Each season removed more animals from the population before natural predators had access. As prey numbers declined, saber-tooths faced a mathematical problem. Their hunting method required high success probability per attempt. A lion can attempt multiple hunts per day, abandoning failures quickly. A saber-tooth's ambush required careful approach and significant effort. Fewer encounters meant fewer chances to eat. Even small decreases in encounter rate drastically affected survival. Population dynamics also played a role. Large predators reproduce slowly. Gestation periods are long, and offspring require extended care. If adult mortality rises while juvenile survival falls, recovery becomes impossible. Fossil evidence suggests the final saber-tooth populations became sparse before disappearing completely. Reduced genetic diversity likely accelerated decline. Competition at carcasses increased during this time as well. When prey is rare, predators converge on the same kills. Endurance hunters like wolves could follow a saber-tooth and attempt to steal its prey after the kill. Without group defense or ability to feed quickly, the saber-tooth risked losing energy investment repeatedly. Such losses compound starvation risk. Over generations, fewer young survived to adulthood. Older individuals died without replacement. Eventually, the remaining populations became too small to sustain themselves. The extinction did not occur in a single year, but as a gradual fading across centuries. Different regions lost saber-tooths at slightly different times, depending on local conditions. The end of saber-tooths illustrates a broader principle of evolution. Extreme specialization brings efficiency in stable conditions, but vulnerability in changing ones. The saber-killing method was extraordinarily effective against large herbivores, yet it depended entirely on their continued abundance. Once that foundation weakened, no rapid adaptation could compensate. After their disappearance, no predator evolved identical teeth again in the same ecosystems. Modern big cats retained moderate canine length combined with stronger jaws and flexible hunting behavior. They represent a compromised design capable of handling varied prey sizes. The era of the specialized throat-slashing giant predator had ended. However, the repeated appearance of saber-tooths throughout deep time shows that the design was never a mistake. It was a recurring solution shaped by particular ecological circumstances. Whenever evolution produced large, slow herbivores and suitable habitats, a predator line eventually evolved elongated cutting canines to exploit them. The Ice Age extinction simply removed the conditions that allowed such predators to exist in the recent world. Although the Ice Age extinctions ended the final sabertooths, the evolutionary idea behind them did not belong only to cats. Across mammalian history, the saber design appeared multiple times in completely unrelated groups. This repeated emergence reveals something important about predator and prey relationships. The saber-tooth was not a random mutation preserved by chance. It was a predictable response to certain ecological conditions. Long before the famous Pleistocene predators, different carnivorous mammals independently evolved elongated upper canines. The earliest were the nimravids, already discussed, which were not true cats. Later came barbarophelids, again unrelated to modern felines. Even outside carnivorans, some distant mammalian relatives developed similar teeth. Each lineage existed in a time when large herbivores dominated their environments. This pattern suggests that whenever prey animals become large, slow, and numerous, a specialized killing method becomes advantageous. Crushing bites require immense jaw strength and prolonged struggle, increasing injury risk. A slicing throat attack allows a smaller predator to kill efficiently without wrestling for extended periods. Over evolutionary time, natural selection repeatedly refined this method. However, each occurrence also ended in extinction. No saber lineage persisted indefinitely. The reason lies in the balance between specialization and adaptability. As long as prey type remained consistent, specialization produced success. When prey changed, specialization limited survival options. Evolution therefore repeatedly built and dismantled saber predators as ecosystems shifted. Comparing saber-tooths to modern predators clarifies the difference. Lions and tigers possess strong but moderate-length canines. They can suffocate large prey, hunt medium animals, or occasionally capture smaller targets. Wolves rely on stamina and teamwork. Hyenas combine bone crushing with scavenging. Each strategy sacrifices peak efficiency for flexibility. Saber-tooths chose the opposite trade-off. Their efficiency against large prey was unmatched. Yet their anatomical commitment restricted alternative feeding. Their long teeth could not easily process bone, and repeated biting risked breakage. They were specialists in a world that eventually required generalists. The rise of humans amplified this requirement for flexibility. Humans hunted a wide variety of animals and altered landscapes through fire and coordinated movement. Predators capable of shifting diet survived alongside humans. Those bound to a single prey category declined. This is why wolves, bears, and smaller cats continued into modern times while saber-tooths vanished. Fossil evidence also shows that saber features evolved gradually within each lineage. Teeth lengthened generation by generation as individuals better suited to killing large prey reproduced more successfully. The process was not a sudden transformation, but a steady directional change. Over time, moderate canines became long blades. The body reorganized around them, reinforcing neck muscles and forelimbs while reducing endurance. Once the anatomical threshold passed, reversal became difficult. A species with extremely long canines cannot easily shorten them within a few generations. By the time environmental change occurred, adaptation lagged behind ecological pressure. This delay explains why extinction often followed environmental disruption rather than gradual transformation into new predator types. Therefore, saber-tooths represent evolutionary commitment. They illustrate how natural selection can drive a lineage toward remarkable efficiency under stable conditions, but at the cost of resilience. Their history across multiple families of mammals shows both the power and limitation of specialization. Even today, echoes of the saber strategy exist in milder form. Some modern predators aim for throat bites, and certain herbivores retain defensive structures around the neck. The interaction between prey defense and predator attack continues shaping anatomy. The saber-tooths were simply the most extreme expression of this ongoing evolutionary dialogue between hunter and hunted. Another way to understand saber-tooths is to examine the prey animals themselves. Evolution never acts on predators alone. Every change in a hunter triggers a response in the hunted, and those responses reshape the predator again. The rise and fall of saber-toothed predators reflects a long arms race between offensive and defensive anatomy. Large herbivores of the past were not simply oversized versions of modern animals. Many had thick neck muscles, heavy skin, and dense fur. Some possessed horns or tusks capable of injuring attackers. A predator attempting to suffocate such prey faced danger from kicks and trampling. A long, cutting bite offered a safer alternative. By severing blood vessels quickly, the predator avoided prolonged struggle. As saber predators became more efficient, prey species developed countermeasures. Herd behavior intensified. Living in groups allowed early detection of ambush attempts. Larger body size also evolved because extremely large individuals were difficult to topple. Faster running ability appeared in later ungulates, reducing vulnerability to short-range attacks. These defensive trends forced predators to adjust. Some saber-tooths became heavier to overpower large prey. Others became faster to reach them before escape. The two major strategies, dirk-toothed and scimitar-toothed, can be viewed as responses to different prey defenses. Heavy ambushes targeted massive animals that relied on strength. More mobile saber-cats hunted faster herd species through persistence. However, prey evolution eventually shifted beyond what saber-tooths could track. During late Ice Age environmental change, many herbivores reduced in size or adopted migration patterns that required long-distance travel. Predators capable of sustained pursuit gained advantage. Those dependent on close ambush lost opportunities. Humans added a new defensive layer for prey animals as well. Herds that encountered human hunters altered movement routes and became more cautious overall. This indirectly reduced encounter rates for ambush predators. Even without directly competing for the same individual animals, human presence reshaped prey behavior enough to influence predator success. The relationship between tooth structure and prey defense is visible in wear patterns. Sabertooth canines remain sharp with minimal bone abrasion, indicating precise targeting of soft areas. In contrast, modern big cats show more varied wear because they engage in diverse prey handling methods. This difference highlights how tightly sabertooths were linked to specific prey anatomy. When prey diversity declines, specialized predators face rapid pressure. Generalists can shift focus to alternative animals. Specialists cannot. The final disappearance of sabertooths occurred not because their methods stopped working, but because the specific prey types it worked best against became rare or unpredictable. Over evolutionary time, predator and prey cycles produced repeated appearances of saber forms followed by extinction. Each cycle began with abundant large herbivores and ended with environmental disruption and prey transformation. The pattern reinforces the idea that sabertooths were an ecological phase rather than a permanent category of animal. Today's ecosystems lack the same combination of abundant megafauna and limited human influence that once supported these predators. Without those conditions, the selective pressure favoring extremely long slicing canines no longer exists. Modern predators evolved toward balanced designs that tolerate uncertainty. Thus, the history of sabertooths is not simply about impressive teeth. It is about interaction between environment, prey behavior, and anatomical commitment. Their repeated rise and fall demonstrates how evolution shapes organisms to fit specific worlds, and how the disappearance of those worlds removes even the most formidable creatures. The story of sabertooths ultimately leads to a broader understanding of extinction itself. These predators did not vanish because they were weak, primitive, or poorly adapted. For millions of years, they were among the most efficient hunters on Earth. Their disappearance shows that evolutionary success is always temporary when environments change faster than anatomy can respond. During the final phase of the Ice Age, multiple pressures converged at once. Climate warming altered vegetation zones across continents. Forest boundaries shifted, grasslands fragmented, and water sources changed seasonal patterns. Herbivore populations reorganized into new distributions that no longer matched long-established predator hunting territories. At the same time, human expansion intensified. Humans hunted in coordinated groups and targeted animals repeatedly at migration routes and water crossings. Even modest hunting levels had cumulative effects because large mammals reproduce slowly. Removing breeding adults reduces population recovery for decades. As prey density declined, predators required larger ranges to locate food. Sabertooths were especially vulnerable to this change in spatial structure. Their hunting depended on predictability. They needed environments where prey regularly passed through cover that allowed close approach. When migration paths shifted or became irregular, ambush success fell dramatically. Unlike endurance predators, they could not compensate by searching continuously over vast distances. Another issue involved competition timing. Humans often arrived at carcasses quickly after a kill due to tracking ability. Even if saber-tooths succeeded in hunting, they might lose part or all of the carcass. Repeated loss lowered caloric intake below survival thresholds. Because the animals required significant energy for muscle maintenance, starvation risk increased quickly. Population fragmentation followed. Small, isolated groups produce fewer offspring and face greater chance of genetic problems. Fossil distribution near the end of the Pleistocene shows reduced geographic spread compared to earlier periods. This contraction indicates shrinking populations before final extinction. The disappearance did not occur simultaneously worldwide. Some regions lost saber-tooths earlier, depending on local climate and human presence. However, all remaining populations eventually faced the same limitation. Their anatomical specialization prevented rapid dietary change. They could not transform into pursuit predators within a few generations, and natural selection requires many generations to reshape body structure. The extinction of saber-tooths also coincided with the disappearance of other specialized predators. Those that survived tended to have flexible diets or adaptable hunting strategies. This pattern reinforces the role of ecological versatility in long-term survival. Despite their extinction, saber-tooths left lasting influence on predator evolution. Later, big cats retained aspects of their ancestors' throat-targeting behavior, but reduced canine length to maintain strength and durability. The modern feline design balances cutting ability with structural safety. In a sense, living cats represent a compromise between extreme specialization and adaptability. The fossil record shows that whenever ecosystems produce abundant large herbivores in relative stability, saber forms evolve again. If similar conditions returned for long enough, evolution might eventually recreate comparable predators. Their absence today reflects current ecological structure rather than impossibility. Saber-tooths therefore symbolize an evolutionary solution suited to a particular world. When that world changed, the solution ended. Understanding this process clarifies that extinction is often not failure, but mismatch between anatomy and environment. The disappearance of saber-tooths closed a long chapter in mammalian evolution, but it also reveals how predictable evolution can be. Across tens of millions of years, unrelated predators repeatedly developed the same weapon. Each time, the pattern followed a familiar sequence. Large herbivores became abundant, predators adapted to exploit them efficiently, specialization intensified, and eventually environmental change removed the conditions supporting that specialization. This repeating cycle shows that saber-tooths were not evolutionary accidents. They were solutions produced whenever ecosystems favored a precise form of killing. The elongated canines, wide jaw opening, reinforced neck, and powerful forelimbs formed a coordinated system. Remove any one part and the strategy fails. Keep the environment stable and the strategy thrives. In the modern world, predator communities look very different. Most surviving large carnivores are generalists to some degree. Lions can hunt prey of many sizes. Tigers shift habitats across forests and wetlands, and wolves adapt diet based on availability. Their teeth reflect this flexibility. Canines are long enough to grip, but short enough to resist breakage. Bite force balances holding and cutting rather than maximizing one function. If saber-tooths had survived into recent times, they would likely struggle in today's fragmented habitats. Human-dominated landscapes break migration routes and reduce concentrations of large herbivores. A predator requiring predictable encounters with massive prey would rarely meet its energetic needs. The same features that once made saber-tooths formidable would now hinder survival. The legacy of saber-tooths, therefore, lies not in direct descendants, but in the lessons they provide about adaptation. Evolution shapes organisms toward efficiency in present conditions, not toward permanence. The more perfectly a species fits a specific ecological niche, the more dependent it becomes on that niche continuing unchanged. Fossils preserve this lesson clearly. From nimravids in ancient forests to Smilodon in Ice Age plains, the anatomy grows increasingly specialized. Teeth lengthen, limbs strengthen, and behavior narrows toward a single optimal hunting method. Then, environmental disruption removes the prey base and the lineage fades. Another group later evolves similar features when similar prey returns, beginning the cycle again. This perspective also explains why modern predators avoid extreme dental specialization. Natural selection now favors resilience in fluctuating environments. Instead of maximizing performance against one prey type, predators benefit from versatility. The absence of saber-tooths today reflects the instability of recent ecosystems compared to the long, stable periods that allowed them to flourish. In the end, saber-tooths were neither evolutionary failures nor primitive experiments. They were highly successful predators, perfectly matched to the worlds they inhabited. Their extinction occurred not because they were inferior hunters, but because the conditions that shaped them no longer existed. Their fossils remain as evidence of how powerfully environment directs form. Whenever large, slow herbivores dominate landscapes, evolution tends to produce predators capable of precise lethal strikes. Whenever those landscapes disappear, so do the predators built for them. The saber-tooth story is therefore not only about impressive teeth, but about the continuous interplay between life and changing Earth over deep time. Long after the last saber-tooth vanished, the world they once dominated continued to change. Grasslands expanded and contracted, forests returned in some regions, and new predator communities formed. Modern ecosystems appear stable to human observation, yet they represent only a brief moment in a long cycle of transformation. The absence of saber-tooths is not permanent in an absolute sense. It reflects present conditions rather than a closed possibility. If we look carefully at living predators, traces of the old strategy remain. Large cats still aim for the throat when subduing prey. They instinctively seek areas where major blood vessels lie close to the surface. The difference is scale. Their teeth are proportioned to withstand repeated use across varied prey, rather than to maximize cutting depth in a single motion. Evolution preserved the concept, but moderated the extreme expression. Herbivores also retain features shaped during the age of sabertooths. Many species possess thick neck muscles and social vigilance behaviors that originally evolved under pressure from precision-killing predators. Herd formation, constant scanning, and rapid coordinated movement reflect ancient dangers. Even without the sabertooths present, these traits continue because other predators exploit similar vulnerabilities, though less efficiently. The fossil record demonstrates that ecological roles persist even when species do not. The role once filled by sabertooths is now divided among multiple predators using different methods. Instead of a single specialized killer, modern systems rely on a balance of hunters with varied strengths. This diversity stabilizes food webs under changing climates. Human influence has altered the pattern further. By reshaping landscapes and controlling many large herbivore populations, humans reduce the likelihood of conditions that once produced saber predators. Yet, conservation efforts that restore large grazing animals show how quickly ecological dynamics respond. When herds grow and migrate predictably, predator populations expand. Though no sabertooth will reappear in human timescales, the same principles guiding their evolution continue operating. Studying sabertooths, therefore, extends beyond curiosity about extinct animals. It reveals how anatomy, behavior, and environment interlock. A species may become extraordinarily efficient within a narrow context, but long-term survival favors balance between efficiency and adaptability. The sabertooths illustrate the far end of that spectrum. In a distant future, if ecosystems again stabilize around abundant, large, slow herbivores for millions of years, natural selection may once more favor predators with elongated cutting canines. They would not be the same species and would arise from different ancestors, yet their form would echo the past. Evolution often repeats successful designs when circumstances repeat. For now, the story remains written in stone. From early forest hunters to the great cats of the Ice Age, sabertooths demonstrate the power of specialization and the inevitability of change. Their existence reminds us that dominance in nature is always temporary, shaped by environments that never remain constant. Imagine standing in a Pleistocene grassland at dusk. The air is cool, the ground marked by tracks of bison and young mammoths moving toward water. Nothing dramatic appears at first. The horizon is quiet. Yet, somewhere nearby, a predator waits, perfectly adapted to this moment. It does not chase across the open plain, and it does not roar to announce its presence. Its advantage lies in precision. When the distance closes to only a few meters, a single controlled movement decides life or death. This scene repeated countless times across millions of years. It shaped bones, muscles, instincts, and even the behavior of entire herds. The sabertooth was not merely an animal, but a process influencing every species around it. Prey evolved caution, speed, and cooperation. Competing predators adapted alternative strategies. The landscape itself carried the imprint of these interactions. When sabertooths disappeared, the physical environment remained, but the ecological tension changed. Other predators filled portions of the role, yet none replaced the exact pressure they applied. Over generations, prey species adjusted. Some defensive traits became less critical, while others remained because new threats replaced old ones. Ecosystems do not freeze after extinction. They reorganize, redistributing influence among survivors. The study of sabertooths shows that extinction is not only loss, but transition. Each vanished lineage leaves structural space for different relationships to develop. The end of the saber predators allowed generalist hunters to dominate large carnivore niches. These hunters, in turn, interacted differently with prey, altering vegetation patterns and migration routes. A single anatomical feature, elongated canines, once affected entire landscapes. Today, fossils act as records of these invisible forces. A skull with oversized teeth reveals not just how one animal lived, but how an entire system functioned. From jaw mechanics, we infer hunting style. From hunting style, we infer prey behavior. From prey behavior, we infer vegetation and climate. In this way, sabertooths become guides to reconstructing lost worlds. Their story emphasizes continuity across time. Life does not progress toward a final form. Instead, it responds repeatedly to recurring challenges. When certain conditions appear, certain solutions evolve. When conditions vanish, so do the solutions. The sabertooths existed because their world demanded them, and they vanished when it no longer did. The modern world contains different challenges, and modern animals reflect those demands. Yet the principles remain unchanged. Evolution still favors efficiency within present circumstances, and environments still change beyond any species' control. The sabertooth lineage stands as one of the clearest demonstrations of this rule, a reminder that adaptation is always temporary, even at its most impressive. Across deep time, predators and prey form repeating patterns that can be read almost like geological layers. Each layer represents a balance point between speed, strength, awareness, and efficiency. The sabertooths belonged to a layer defined by size. When herbivores grew massive and numerous, evolution rewarded predators capable of ending encounters quickly. Long cutting teeth became the most reliable answer to a dangerous problem. But the remarkable detail is how consistent this answer was. Different continents, different climates, and different mammal families all arrived at similar anatomical structures. The skull widened, the jaw opened farther, the neck strengthened, and the forelimbs took over the role of restraint. These similarities were not coincidence. They reveal that certain ecological conditions narrow evolutionary possibilities. When prey cannot be outrun and cannot be easily crushed, slicing becomes optimal. Fossils show that each saber-tooth lineage began with moderate teeth and flexible hunting habits. Over generations, individuals with slightly longer canines gained advantages against large prey. Their offspring inherited the trait, and the cycle repeated. Eventually, the animals became specialists whose bodies revolved around one decisive movement. At that point, success was high, but adaptability was low. The decline phase followed environmental change rather than gradual inferiority. Prey species fragmented into smaller populations or shifted habitats. Migration routes altered and encounters became unpredictable. The specialized predator still functioned perfectly in isolated cases, but it could no longer rely on frequency. Evolution favors consistency more than peak performance. A predator that succeeds half as efficiently but twice as often survives longer. Modern carnivores demonstrate this compromise. Their teeth and behavior allow hunting under varied conditions, even if no single attempt matches the efficiency of a saber-tooth strike. They trade certainty for opportunity. This trade keeps populations stable despite changing climates and prey communities. The saber-tooths therefore represent a natural experiment repeated many times. Each repetition confirmed the same principle. Extreme efficiency evolves under stable abundance, and flexibility evolves under instability. Neither is superior in all situations. Each fits a particular world. Looking at their fossils today is less about imagining ferocity and more about understanding balance. Their anatomy shows how tightly life can align with environment and how quickly that alignment dissolves when conditions shift. The stone remains of their teeth are records of ecosystems that once required them, and reminders that future ecosystems will demand different forms entirely.